Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Opening series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and as you can see, I just cannot leave the Budapest alone. I was trying out the new engine Obsidian, as you do. What else do you have to do with your life? And I was looking at what it wanted to play against the Budapest. And in the end, it came up with 4 bishop f4, which is one of the main lines. But on the way, it suggested something interesting. And I'd actually noticed the engine sort of suggesting this and then moving away from it afterwards. And it looks like such an interesting line. I just thought I'd share it with you. So let's have a look at how it goes. So d4, knight f6, c4, e5, the glorious Budapest, d takes c5, knight g4. And now, there are the old main lines, bishop f4 and knight f3 as well, and the line that Torch and most of the modern engines actually want, Stockfish and Leela 2, which is knight takes c5 and then f4, and after knight c6, and this very important move, knight c3. With the idea of bishop c5, knight a4, bishop b4 check, king f2. Looks really weird, but turns out to be really strong. I mean, basically, we're knocking these black minor pieces off their good squares on c5 and e5, taking control of the center, and the slight disconnection of white's position does not last long. White gets it back together, and black's got very little counterplay. Whole set of videos all about this. But what Obsidian sort of was looking at for a little while was the move knight c3. Well, as you've seen, moving the knight on c3 before developing the knight on f3 is quite a big idea in against the Budapest. The idea being that you keep the possibility, after black goes knight takes e5, of playing the move f2 to f4 and chasing that knight away from e5 and gaining central space. However, after knight takes e5, this is the main move for black. What the engines were looking at here was the interesting idea virtually never played, which is just to play knight f3. Knight f3, what is this move? What has black got? The first and most obvious thing is, cannot black take this c4 pawn, which is hanging? Well, he can, but it's not as good as you think it is. Because white plays the move queen d5. We'll point out as well that crazy Leela liked the move bishop g5 as well, which is quite interesting. What's the point? Well, the point is if black plays f6, then white plays the move bishop f4 and then follows up with queen b3, and you can do pretty much anything you like. Castle queenside, and you'll break open the center, and pretty dangerous for black too. But in principle, black's doing all right in there. The main move that the engines want is the move queen d5, which is quite surprising. And here black's got a couple of possibilities. The most obvious move is knight b6. And now the whole point of white's idea, queen e5 check. And this is surprisingly awkward. If you play bishop e7, I'm going to take on g7, which is just quite nice for white. Knight e4 is rather awkward. The bishop gets attacked. Knight d7, g3. And we're just at some stage going to take the bishop. We'll have the 2 bishops, better pawn structure, weak black king. White's just got a clear advantage here. But if you play queen to e7, then we take the pawn on c7. And, what is the result of the opening, basically? The result of the opening is that black's got a damaged pawn structure. That's all that white's claiming. White's just claiming a slight advantage because of that. Simple 8 moves, damaged pawn structure for black, slight advantage for white. Now, after knight c6, we can do a couple of different things. a3 was one idea. And after d6, we go knight b5. And the main line here, this is Obsidian against Torch. This was Obsidian's favourite idea with white. Knight b5, rather awkward. Queen e6. And then we take and go knight c7 and knight takes c6 here. And yeah, I mean, white's just got a slight advantage here. Nice pawn structure. Black's got double B pawns and a weak D pawn. A little bit of counterplay for black, but yeah, this is just very pleasant for white. The engine's games between Obsidian and Torch were ending in a draw, but quite decent. And you've got to say that after knight b5, yeah, it is a little bit awkward for black. Yeah? This move queen e6 not completely obvious. So if you catch an opponent unawares in this, I think the chances that he's going to have to spend a lot of time to work out what to do pretty big. And I mean, it also moves like queen e6. You've got to think about, knight g5. Might that be possible? Who knows? So that's quite an interesting idea. Another move that was played was queen g3. This was what Torch was playing against Obsidian. Just with the idea that after, for example, a move like d5, you play a3, and you're also threatening here knight b5. For example, this was a game of Torches against Obsidian. Knight c7, king d7. Played the move knight e5, queen g6, queen b3. Knight c4, takes, and we got this position. Okay, it's an IQP. White's just, again, a little bit better, and black's position is quite awkward. But if you look at the threats that black has had to think of, after you play queen g3, after you play queen g3 here, black's always having to work out what happens after knight b5. How should I develop for the best? And then always simply the risk of just ending up in a normal IQP position where white's slightly better. Again, quite awkward there. So this is the very nice point of this move, queen d5. After knight b6, queen e5, white is just winning the sacrifice pawn on c4 back with a better pawn structure and some slightly annoying, awkward things for black to work out, especially if you're coming, at this from the start and not with engine analysis. Knight d6 is perhaps the most obvious thing, because after, if you do go queen e5, we can go queen e7. We don't have to give material back. But none of the engines want to play this as black. e4, Torch, Obsidian, Leela already at 0.82. And for example, bishop e7. Don't worry about writing the lines down. I'll put this very detailed PGN up on the normal Lichess studies, so you can see that. But yeah, many moves. h4 surprisingly popular for whites, but e5 was another line that Leela was playing quite a lot actually. Queen d2, knight f5, g4, just chasing the knight back. And then queen d4, and just sort of controlling it. This was also Torch against Obsidian. And, well, this was how one of the games went. Knight e4, bishop g5, and, for the pawn, white's got enormous compensation here. d6 is weak. Knight is offside on h6. And, big space advantage for white, very difficult for black to get free. And Torch beat Obsidian from this position. And, yeah, you just see a lot of white wins in all of this. Leela against Torch, Torch against Leela. So this line is, knight takes c4, possible. But, yeah, I mean, a little bit risky for black. Certainly would not be an easy thing for black to decide on for the first game. If you go knight f3, then, I mean, e takes f3 is possible, but g takes f3 is really what the engines want here. And after d6, rook g1, and, I mean, we've just got this position where, white's got the possibility, he's going to grab hold of the center and, castle queen side, and you've got the rook, attacking the on the g file. A lot of games ending in white wins from here. Knight c6, e4. Bishop g5 also possible as well. G6, knight d5, bishop g7, bishop g5. And yeah, just playing h4 here, for example. With, yeah, just plenty of play. Queen d2, castle queenside. Just very, very attacking play for white. So knight takes f3, not really recommended. The engines don't like that at all. And if you want to play a little bit more quietly, then you can play the move knight bc6. And then we've got, a few different options. What I really liked actually was just the very restrained knight takes c5 here. Knight d5 is an engine line, just looking for some bishop g5 stuff. Also quite interesting, but knight takes c5 takes, and bishop f4 is very nice. 0.68 according to Torch. The idea is, if you play a move like d6, I can play a move like g3, for example. Knight takes c4 here. Of course, I've got queen a4 check. c6, I go b3, bishop e7, bishop g2. And it's just like an English opening, a very nice English opening where, this pawn on c4 restricts the pawn on d6, and black's really struggling for counterplay. I can just play my pieces nice and solidly, castle kingside, h3, king h2, and then eventually e4 and f4. Control for white, no problems at all for white for anything, so pretty nice really. And it resembles a little bit the line that Cyrus Lagdawala recommended against the Budapest, which was to play the move b3. And again, it was a very similar idea. Just try and get this structure with a c pawn against a d pawn, and then just develop after. But it's just a little bit less challenging. And Leela was finding ways to just wreck the white ideal structure a little bit. But after this position, knight f3, knight c6, takes, and bishop f4 like this, and then g3 and b3, then you're basically getting an ideal structure, looking very, very nice indeed for white. I mean, another idea, of course, after bishop f4 is you can simply play a move like e3. You've developed easily, bishop outside the pawn chain, bishop e2, castles. Again, it's a slight advantage for white. Not terrible for black, but just very pleasant for white as well. So, I mean, that's really this move after knight takes c5, the main line, knight f3. Those are the main lines, knight f3, knight c4, and knight c6, and all of them look pretty good. I should just point out, I've just realized as well, that if you go here, knight takes c4, then we go queen d4. And again, it's similar lines to what we saw. If you go knight b6, I go queen e5 check. And this time I'm going to take on here. I've just ruined your structure, and you've got an isolated d pawn there. And you've got to watch out for stuff like knight b5 coming in. And if you go knight takes c4, queen d4, and you go if you go d5, I'll go e4, break it open like that. I'm going to go castle queenside, and I'll have knight takes d5. I mean, you're in real trouble here. The engines were not surviving this as black. And if you go back to d6, then this move rook c1 is really awful. I mean, I'm threatening ideas like knight d5, just impossible for you to defend anything. The best the engines found was to go queen f6, allow knight d5 and knight c7, when, I think we're going to be pretty happy with this, even just picking up the exchange straight away there. So this is not a bad line at all, I think, for white. Incredible this, never really been played before. I mean, what else can black do? I mean, if you go bishop c5, white's actually got a couple of nice ideas. One idea that very much resembles what we've looked at in previous videos in the Budapest is just to play e3, attacking the knight on g4, and after knight takes e5, just to play f4 here. You chase the knight away, and then you just play bishop d3, and then knight e2 and castles. This idea of playing like this against the Budapest, I first saw it in a book called Gambit Killer by Ivan Salgado Lopez for Thinkers Publishing. Very good book, very powerful idea, this e3 and f4. It's with a slight twist, slightly different development method, bishop on d3, knight on e2. But yeah, definitely a good idea, and both Obsidian and Torch like this an awful lot. What you can also do after bishop c5, there's a nice little twist. You can also play the move knight e4, hitting the bishop on c5, defending f2. And I mean, Torch against Obsidian, for example, this was happening. Takes, knight e5, knight c3, e4, f4, knight f3. Just with a nice advantage for white here. I mean, it doesn't look an enormous amount to me. White's got a slight space advantage and central space advantage, and black hasn't got very much counterplay at all. But the engines were actually scoring very heavily from this, which surprised me slightly. I didn't think the advantage was that great. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice specific little idea. You know, knight e4 against bishop c5. There, you don't normally get the chance to do this. That's the value of playing, you know, an early knight c3. But probably the very best move is to go e3 here, and then f4, and just play it like this. Very much resembles the game that of Smyslov and Spassky that I showed in an earlier video when I was explaining, you know, what did the best players in the world, what sort of schemes did they come up with against the Budapest, and indeed playing this move f4 to chase the knight away from e5 was one of them. And it's quite similar as well. If black plays the move knight c6, you again play e3, hitting the knight on g4, and after knight e5, you play f4 again. And here the engines wanted to throw in a3 just to beat bishop c5 with b4. So actually the engines thought that knight ge7 was the best move here, and just to play g6. But you know, this is very castles queenside from Torch here. You know, very pleasant and very powerful, and you know, you're looking for stuff like h4 to h5 afterwards as well. You know, just pretty powerful. Black's really cramped and struggling to get at all at the white position. So yeah, again, also very interesting indeed. So there we are. That is an interesting little system against Budapest. Virtually never played. This knight takes c5, knight f3 system. I'm sure people, you know, thought, oh, that pawn on c4 is just hanging too much. But actually looks, you know, very nice, a very nice, safe way to reach a slight advantage for white. Completely unknown for black. If black decides that he has to take you on, he doesn't just want to give you a nice safe advantage, then yeah, I think he can very easily get into trouble after knight takes c4, queen d5. And yeah, to be honest, these lines for white, they're not completely obvious at all. I mean, it would be very easy for black to spend half an hour on knight takes c4 and still miss some of the details after queen d5. So, you know, I'd say give it a go, try and be the first to play it, and I'm pretty sure you're going to have a lot of success with it. So there we are, more stuff on the Budapest there. I just can't leave this opening alone. And, you know, thanks very much. Hope you're enjoying these videos. I've got quite a few new series coming along that I'm working on. And I think probably in the meantime, I'll fill it up with a few random things I've been doing that I noticed during the Olympiad, or just through reading lots of books. So do stay tuned for that. And if you like the video, like the series, like the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, tell your friends, and otherwise hope to see you soon at the next video. Thanks for watching.